Hola, buen día a todos y a todas. Es un placer darles la bienvenida en
Good
nombre de
morning,
Obreal a
everyone. It is a
este
pleasure to welcome you
seminario
in the name of
webinario
Obreal to this webinar
denominado
we
Mujeres,
have
Resiliencia y
called
Construcción de Paz en
Women,
África, América
Resilience and Peace
Latina
Builders in
y Europa.
Africa, Europe and
Mi
Latin
nombre es Florencia
America.
Valle, yo soy
My
la
name
coordinadora
is
de la oficina de
Florence
Obreal
Vergés. I'm the
para
coordinator
América
of
del
Obreal
Sur.
Office for
Y bueno,
South
es un gusto
America.
saludar
And
tanto
it is
a
a
los
pleasure
panelistas
to
como
say
a
hello to
los
our panelists
invitadas
and
que
everyone
participan en el seminario.
connected.
I will speak a little bit in English to let you know that we have online translation Spanish, English, English, Spanish that you can set on your Zoom. Para todos los presentes les quiero avisar que tenemos traducción simultánea español-inglés, inglés-español, que directamente lo pueden setear desde el Zoom de cada uno de ustedes. Bueno, como una muy breve introducción, les quiero
As a
comentar
brief
que
introduction, I
este
just wanted to
webinario
mention
se
that this
enmarca en una
webinar
serie de actividades
is
preparatorias
happening
que
within
Obreal
the
viene
framework
realizando
of the
en camino a
preliminary
una gran
activities by
actividad que
L'Oréal
se realiza desde
towards the
ya hace 4
big
años en Obreal,
activity
que es el Diálogo
organized
Internacional sobre
for the
Educación,
last 30
Europa,
years,
América
which
Latina
is
y
the
África.
Interregional
El
Dialogue
próximo
on
diálogo se va a
Education and
realizar en
Development.
Bogotá en el mes
The
de
next
noviembre.
dialogue will take place
La
in
idea de
Bogota in
este
November,
primer
and the
día,
idea
de
of these
este primer evento
webinars,
que
this is
realizamos,
the
es
fourth one,
poder ir marcando
is
una
to
hoja de
be
ruta
able to
e
set
ir
the
fijando algunas
roadmap
conclusiones claves
and
en temáticas
finding key
que
conclusions
nos interesan a todos,
regarding the topics we're
para poder
interested in
en noviembre en
in
Bogotá
order
llegar con una
for
agenda de trabajo
us
mucho más
to arrive
consolidada
in
y mucho más
November with a
precisa a una
consolidated
de estas
agenda
temáticas.
regarding these
Toda la
topics.
información
All
respecto
the
al
information
tercer
regarding the
diálogo
third
internacional que se va
dialogue
a realizar en Bogotá
that
en
will take
noviembre
place
está en
in
mi
Bogota in
página web.
November
Yo ahora les voy a dejar el
is
enlace
can be
junto
found
con
in
toda
our
esa información
website.
y
I will
también
leave
todas
the
las
information
actividades que
in the
estaremos
chat,
llevando adelante desde
and
aquí
together with
hasta
all the
noviembre
activities that
para que
will
puedan
be
estar
carrying
actualizados y puedan
out until
participar
November
plenamente.
so that you can make the most of
Como
them.
este es la idea del webinario es que no sea muy largo y
W-
no se extienda mucho, le voy a dar la palabra en este momento
So,
a Stefan Benfeld, que va a ser
Stefan
nuestro
Benfeld is going
anfitrión,
to
va a
be
coordinar
the
este panel
host of this
de speakers que
panel. He
tenemos.
will
Quiero
coordinate the
agradecer muchísimo la
speakers,
presencia tenemos
and I
speakers
wanted to
de
thank
América
them all.
Latina,
We
de
have people
África y
from
de
Latin
Europa.
America, Africa, and
Muchísimas
Europe.
gracias
Thank you so
en nombre de
much
Obreal a todos por
in
estar
the name of
participando.
L'Oréal for
Stefan,
participating
it's all
today.
yours.
Stefan,
Thank you.
you have the floor.
Thank you, Florencia. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you also to the speakers for joining this, well, in Europe, late afternoon, in Latin America, early morning session. That's the beauty of working across continental boundaries. We all live in different time zones, but this, I think, is a time that is acceptable for everybody except our colleagues in Asia, where it's already very late in the evening. Yes, thank you very much again. We today in this webinar, we want to focus on the issue of women, peace building, and resilience. And we have a couple of speakers with very different backgrounds and experiences on the issue. The idea is that, as are also acknowledged by the United Nations and a number of the various international players at governmental and non-governmental level, women have been playing a central role in peace building after armed conflicts, or also during, and resilience building during armed conflicts while they are still going on. And we would like to focus a little bit on this topic, gender-specific, female-specific impacts of violence and wars and conflicts, and also the way of dealing and coping with them afterwards during this next, well, approximately 2 hours. We have, as I said, a number of speakers, and we would like to start with the first speaker, who is Monica Perdomo Perez from Colombia. She has been a university professor and researcher in the departments of psychology. I'm a psychologist myself, so I feel close to that in terms of the content and context at the University of Ibagué in Colombia for the past 10 years. She holds a PhD in psychology from the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid and a master's degree from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid in Spain. She has extensive experiences in psychological interventions with an emphasis on community resilience, peace building, and support for victims of the armed conflict and individuals undergoing reintegration processes. She has also led and participated in multiple projects based on participatory action research applied to contexts of social political violence, natural disasters, and rural communities, and coordinates a graduate program in psychosocial intervention at the university she works in. She previously also directed the research group Education, Health, and Society. She is, as I said, an expert on gender-specific aspects of violence and currently involved in projects related to the environmental peace and restoration in reintegration zones linked to the peace agreement in Colombia. So, Monica, the floor is yours, and I would like you to share your experiences. Thank you very much for joining us.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, es un
Thank you so
gusto
much. It is a
estar con
pleasure
ustedes hoy
to
en
be
este
here
encuentro.
today in this meeting. My name is
Parte de la
Mónica
Universidad
Perdomo.
de
I am part
Ibagué, en
of the
Colombia,
Ibagué
y
University in
agradezco este
Colombia,
espacio
and I'm
donde
very
quiero
thankful
compartir
for
algunas reflexiones
being
sobre
able
el
to
liderazgo
share a
territorial de las
few
mujeres
thoughts
y
on
cómo
the
este se
territorial leadership of
traduce en
women and how
procesos
this
de
translates
construcción, de
into
resiliencia y de
peacebuilding,
conocimiento
resilience,
local,
and knowledge
especialmente cuando
processes,
logramos
especially
articular los
when
espacios
we are
universitarios
able
con los
to articulate
territorios.
uh,
Entonces, si
na-
me permiten, voy a
university and
compartir un
local
par de
spaces.
diapositivas
If
con
you allow me, I
ustedes
will try to share my
que he
slides
diseñado
with you. I
sencillamente
have
para dar
designed
un
them
poco
to provide
de imagen a lo que les voy
some
contando sobre
visual
todo en términos
information
de
around
experiencia
what I'm
social, ¿no?
explaining regarding the experiences.
Lo primero que quiero plantearles
The
es
first thing I wanted to
por
comment
qué hablar
is
de esto, por qué hablar
why
de liderazgo
should we
territorial
talk
de
about
mujeres.
women's
Pues la
territorial
primera
leadership?
respuesta que a lo
Well, the
mejor puede
first
existir y por qué no,
answer
por qué no hablar de ello.
is why not?
Las mujeres definitivamente han sostenido
Women
procesos de paz y
have
resistencia y
promoted
armonía en los territorios,
resilience and
pero durante
peacebuilding
décadas su
processes in the
papel
territories. But
definitivamente
for
ha sido
decades,
invisibilizado en la
the
toma de
role
decisiones,
has
en la
been
planificación territorial.
invisible in
Persisten
territorial
aún brechas
planning, and there are
en la
still gender
gobernanza
gaps
local
in
en los
local
contextos
governance
pues, de conflicto armado y
in,
exclusión.
in a
Estamos
context of
convencidos de
armed
que existen
conflict and
ideas
exclusion.
que existe
We can
una
identify
idea de
that there are
priorización histórica del conocimiento que es situado
an
y se
undervaluation,
sabe que
historical
nace del lugar
undervaluation of
ahondado de la
this knowledge
experiencia y de la
that comes
relación de la vida
from
cotidiana.
the place,
Las
from the
mujeres en
experience
su
and
caso y en estos
daily
contextos no
life
solo
experience.
cuidan o resisten
Women in that context not
este
only provide
conocimiento, pero es un
care and
conocimiento
resistance,
que
they
cada
also
vez
produce
es más
knowledge, and this
visible
knowledge
y
is
es
more and
necesario
more
y es
visible
fundamental.
and should
La
be taken
experiencia de
into
trabajar con
account.
mujeres,
Working
principalmente
with
en zonas
women, in my
rurales
experience
y
in
en
rural
Colombia
areas,
afectadas por el conflicto armado
mostly
colombiano,
affected by
nos
the
ha mostrado que el
Colombian armed
conocimiento
conflict,
situado
has
es necesario,
proven that
que el
these
proceso
located or
en la
situated knowledge is
transición,
a
la
requirement
transición
for any
universitaria,
transformation
trabajar
process
desde nuestros roles, desde
where
lo
we
que
want
significamos
to
y el
take
desafío que
part
tenemos en esta
from our
dinámica
own roles
desafortunadamente global.
to tackle this global issue.
Bajo estas, digamos, estas
Under
premisas o estas
this
anteriores convicciones que
premise
les
and
he manifestado,
convictions I just
hemos
mentioned,
manejado
we
un
have
enfoque de trabajo desde tres pilares que son
created
estos que presento a
three pillars
continuación.
in our work, which are the
Uno es el
following.
liderazgo
One
territorial,
is territorial
otro es la
leadership,
resiliencia
then we
comunitaria y el
have
último
community
es el liderazgo
resilience,
local.
and finally local
Y hablo
knowledge.
necesariamente en plural debido a que
I'm
somos
talking in
muchos
plural
actores universitarios que
because
hemos
we are
tenido la
many
oportunidad de desarrollar el
stakeholders in the
trabajo.
university
Corro pues la
involved in this
suerte
line
de
of work.
participar con un
I
equipo
had
de
I've
mujeres
been lucky to
de
participate with a
diferentes
team of
disciplinas
women
con las
from
que
different
hemos podido
disciplines
generar
with
una
which we've
estrategia
been able
valiosísima
to
de
create a
trabajo que nos
very
permite unir
valuable work
diferentes
strategy that allows us to
lenguajes
work in
disciplinarios,
different
pero también con una amplia
languages
sensibilidad ante las
regarding our
necesidades de los
background, but also with different
territorios.
sensitivities
Entendemos
for our
desde las ideas
territories.
que el
We
liderazgo
understand
territorial es
that
la
territorial
capacidad de
leadership
transformar el
from is the
entorno
capacity
desde
to
su
influence the
profundo
environment
del lugar
based
que
on a
se
deep
habita,
knowledge of
es
the
decir,
place
la
where you live.
experiencia,
That
las
is,
emociones y los
experience,
sentidos enraizan
emotions, and
nuestro
sense
conocimiento y hacen que
permeate
sea
this knowledge
válido
and
en la
make
medida que
it
responda a la
valuable
realidad
as far
auténtica,
as it
que en este
responds
orden de
to
ideas
a
pues la idea de
reality that connects
participación
it.
nos vincula a muchos. El
And
segundo es la
especially when it
resiliencia
links to many people.
y transitamos de lo
Secondly, we have
individual a
resilience.
lo colectivo.
We move
Para
from
ello
individual to
nos instalamos en la
collective.
resiliencia
Now
comunitaria,
we focus on
encontrando
community
la
resilience, and we
vinculación
find
social
that
con
the
nosotros puede
social
facilitar
connection
nuestro
with us
desarrollo
can
con
make it easier
capacidad de
to
resistir
have
una
a greater
situación
capacity to
altamente
resist
traumática,
a
como
traumatic
reconocemos puede ser la
situation
violencia
as
sistemática o
social, political violence or armed conflicts within our countries can be. And of course, this social connection provides us with a better probability to generate transformation, both physical and social, in our environment. And thirdly, the third pillar, which is local knowledge or localized knowledge that can be deduced from the first pillar, and it is that women create knowledge for healing, to organize themselves, to create networks, to negotiate. This knowledge is not always recognized by the academia or universities or the various contexts, but it is a fact that supports community life and historically in many other occasions have provided or made sense of what is going on in the territory. Based on these three pillars, I would like to talk about the idea of gathering here today and ask ourselves about the relations we establish from universities and communities. And I wanted to call this co-creation communities and university. People who work in universities have wondered for many years about our role and the co-responsibility we have in the social development processes based on what we know and the disciplines we work in. We are allies, we are external stakeholders that want to see a transformation, but we have or we follow certain limits or standards based on respect, and we try to establish these relations cross-sectionally with the communities to understand that community participation and co-creation of transformation processes is part of the change of paradigm we require. Not only universities need flexibility in these paradigms. When this happens, teachers, researchers, students, leaders don't follow the extraction logic anymore, and we start building together. This transformation must be mutual, and it redefines what we understand as education and legitimate knowledge. What is legitimate and what is not? From the universities, we want to move towards these models in order to or we had devoted semester, half a year or half term, included in the university, where we connect with community processes with the support of the teachers, and we work as a team with the students. This half term has been called Peace and Region. Let me explain three experiences where I have taken part and which are connected with peace building in the territories, and in many cases the role of women have been very present for us. The first exercise, which I believe is the one that connected us with this component of community resilience, is the Building Resilient Communities program. It was developed by the Ibagué University with the participation of women and people who have been victims of the armed conflict, that have been displaced by violence. And when they arrived to the city, they were stigmatized, excluded, and suffered labor abuse. And this program was focused on community mental health, trying to promote cohesion, the feeling of belonging, emotional connections, conflict resolution, etc., with the aim to work collectively, regardless of stigma and lack of trust through the implementation of a community project that was designed by them from the beginning.
Yo más es como mi intención de poderles presentar estas diapositivas
So
pueden ampliar la información
you
sobre este
can
tipo de
obtain further
este programa
information
específicamente.
on this
Quiero
specific program
leerles
using the QR code.
una de las manifestaciones de
But let
una de
me
nuestras
read
participantes
one of the
y
comments
nos
by
dice,
one of our
ahora soy más
participants.
consciente
She
de mi
says, now I
misión,
am more aware of
de
who
lo
I
que puedo
am,
hacer, de
what I
lo que
can
soy capaz
do, and what
y
I'm
me doy cuenta
capable
de que
of.
no soy la
I also
única que
realize that I
sufre.
am not the only one
Todos
who suffers.
enfrentamos
Everyone faces
dificultades,
difficulties, but I
pero
also
juntas
understand
podemos
that
salir
together we
adelante.
can get
Si
through
bien aquí
this.
podríamos hacer uso de diferentes categorías para
Maybe
interpretar
we
las
could establish
experiencias de esta
different
manifestación,
categories to understand
quiero
this
enfatizar
claim
el
or
potencial de
sentence.
apoyo
I
social y el
wanted
apoyo
to
social
focus on the
intergeneracional
power
para
of social
establecer
support as
políticas incluyentes.
mobilization
La
mechanism for
tercera experiencia ha
transformation. The
sido
third experience
paz,
has
otro ejemplo
been called
significativo
Aromas
para
de
nosotros,
Paz,
en este caso liderado por
Flavors
la
of
doctora
Peace.
Presta de
Another
la Universidad
example
de Lleida
led by
y en el que
Dr.
participó como
Presta
investigadora.
from
Este
the University of
proyecto
Lleida.
articuló el desarrollo
This
sostenible desde
project
un proyecto de cooperación
worked
internacional
on
de
the sustainable
empoderamiento, donde se
development
promovió el empoderamiento de
to
mujeres
promote
víctimas de conflicto
women
armado y construcción de paz
empowerment
social
of
en el
women
sur del
victims
Tolima.
of armed
El sur del Tolima es una zona
conflicts
seriamente
from the
afectada por
south
el
of
conflicto
Tolima,
armado y en donde
affected by
surgió la
armed
red de
conflict,
mujeres chaparraleras
where
por la paz.
the Chaparralunas for
En este
Peace
estado
Women
le puedo
organization was
mencionarles
created.
que podemos tal vez imaginar
Under
asociadas con el
these
conflicto.
conditions and these
Se
conflict
tejen
conditions,
esta vinculación social de
this
mujeres
social
y se
network
encuentran con
among
mujeres
women
que
was
son productoras
created.
de diferentes productos
These
agrícolas
women
que estuvieron
produced
ya hace
uh,
bastante
uh,
tiempo con la
different
capacidad de
agricultural
garantizar
products, and
o
they
promover que más mujeres
joined a long
rurales
time ago
en un
to
espacio
provide
rural
greater autonomy
que
for
colocamos
women
en que
in the
generaran a
rural
través de este
territory
desarrollo de capacidades
through
un mejor
capacity
desarrollo
building
local
to
para
obtain
sus
a better
comunidades.
local development of their
Ellas
communities.
realmente son maravillosas de quienes hemos aprendido
We
muchísimo en la
have learned
universidad
a
y con
lot
quienes
about
seguimos
them
trabajando de
at the
forma
university, and we
cooperativa
continue to
constantemente.
cooperate with
Este
them
proyecto involucró
on a
puntualmente la
constant
instalación de un
basis.
biodigestor que facilitó
A
acciones de
biodigester
cuidado
was
ambiental y
installed
protección
thanks to this project
de
to
las
provide
responsabilidades respectivas de las mujeres
as a
pescadoras
action for
y
care for this
también
community,
promovió la generación
and
de
also
nexos
it
entre
promoted
comunidades a través de diferentes
the
medios.
um,
En este caso,
construction of memories through various
se
means. For
creó
example,
también
we
una especie de
created a number of
infografías
podcasts or
por supuesto
a
también
picture
exhibición,
exhibition,
se
and
co-construyó
we
con
also
las mujeres un
co-created with
diplomado
them
en liderazgo
a
femenino para
degree
la
in
ruralidad
women
a partir de
leadership
la necesidad
in
manifiesta
rural
de este grupo de
territories
mujeres de
based on
generar
their need to
relevos
generate
intergeneracionales y la
the
preocupación de, bueno, ¿y ahora quiénes continuarán
generational
con su legado?
relay, because they were
Pueden
concerned
consultar
about
también
who
en este
will
QR
continue
la
with their
ampliación
work.
de
You
las
can
referencias
further
para
this
esto.
information using this QR code.
Por último,
And finally,
quiero hablarles del
let me
proyecto sobre
tell you
paz
about
ambiental y justicia
the environmental
restaurativa,
peacebuilding and restorative
que
justice
es un
project.
proyecto que
In this
vendría siendo la
project,
experiencia más reciente,
which
es
is the
uno de
most
paz
recent
ambiental,
one about
desarrollado en el
environmental
ETCM en
peacebuilding,
Sur Tolima, otro lugar, un
uh,
epicentro de
carried
paz en
out
este
in
momento,
the
de iniciativas,
ETCR,
acuerdos en este caso.
also in
Allí
Tusolima,
participaron de este
where
proyecto firmantes del acuerdo de
in
paz,
Tolima,
víctimas y jóvenes del
we had the
municipio
participation of
y
victims
todos
and young of the
reafirmaron
municipality
mutuamente la
from all
necesidad de buscar y
backgrounds,
analizar las posibilidades
trying
de
to analyze the
reconciliación
possibilities
integral y
for
integral dentro
reconciliations,
del marco de la Jurisdicción
focusing
Especial
on
de
the
la Paz.
environment
En este
within the
caso, por
framework
medio de
of
la
the special
posible
jurisdiction
implementación
for
de actividades
peace
con contenido
through
restaurador. Este
actions with a
ejercicio sirve para
restorative
saber que el
content.
ambiente puede
This
ser también
exercise
una
showed
forma de
that restoring
restaurar
the environment
confianza,
can be
recuperar
a way to gain
pasado para
trust
construir la comunidad.
and to
Además
rebuild the
de dibujar
community.
serios retos
And on
todavía
top
para
of
la
that,
reconciliación en este
it
territorio
showed that there are still
fronterizo y es
challenges for
epicentre
reconciliation,
debido
which
a las
is the
instabilidades y los
epicenter
procesos que se están
for
tejiendo en
peace
ese lugar.
due to the
En
processes
este
that are
momento
going
tenemos
on
que ir
in that
cerrando, pero
area.
encontramos
This
ya un
project is
video
coming to an
que
end, but we
contextualiza esta
can find
experiencia
or we can see a
que aquí les
video
presento en
that provides more
pantalla.
context, and you can
Ya
access this
para ir
video through the
finalizando
QR
mi
code.
intervención, también teniendo en cuenta
To
los
wrap up
tiempos
my
que
intervention,
nos fueron
and for the
asignados,
sake of
quiero
time,
dejar estos tres aprendizajes
I just wanted to mention the 3 learnings, among many others, and some calls for action. The first one is the need to provide visibility to the processes of territorial autonomy that women are leading. We have found that these peace-building processes have different types of peace, and territories have been building this peace for a long time before these processes. Also, the relationships that need to be developed in order to take women into account, because the basis of these processes. And finally, it is we are initiating transformation of relations between the communities and the universities. We need to be more diligent with this task, because training processes requiring flexibility, mobilization, and the university stakeholders and communities need to participate in order to continuously work with dignity and respect. To end my intervention, I would like to use this sentence. It was a conversation I had with a leader from the south of Tolima, where she said, women don't just survive conflict, they rewrite it, they heal it from their territories, they sow peace. I'm convinced that women leadership is key to transform our territories from care, collective action, and shared knowledge and localized knowledge. This is my email, and I'm available to get to know other initiatives and to broaden our knowledge network connected to this topic. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for sharing these experiences. This was a very interesting first start, I think, for the panel to follow now. We will now move from Latin America, from Colombia, to the context of Eurasia. So a slightly different geographical setting, but as we said, this is an international gathering here, so we want to have drawn experiences from different regions of the world. And we move to Dr. Anya Mir. Anya is a political scientist, consultant, senior lecturer, writer, and researcher who specialized in international human rights law, governance, public policy, and transitional justice, with a focus on Eurasia. She is founder and program director of the Center on Governance through Human Rights at the Berlin Governance Platform in Berlin, Germany, and serves as the academic director of the EU Global Campus of Human Rights Central Asia and the Master Program in Human Rights and Sustainability at the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Coordination in Europe, Academy in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. From 2018 to 2023, she was appointed a member and chair of the Scientific Committee of the European Union Fundamental Rights Agency in Vienna. And before that, she was also appointed vice chair of the Committee on Democratic Baltic Sea by Prime Minister from Mecklenburg-Vorpommern in Germany. She has held associate visiting professorships at the OSCE Academy in Bishkek, the Willy Brandt School of Public Policy in Erfurt in Germany, Netherlands Institute of Human Rights at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, as well as Beida in China. So Anya, let's zoom in a little bit on Eurasia and the different regions in the world. And thank you for joining us, even though this is a public holiday in Germany. So to all German speakers in particular, thank you for joining us, even though this is late afternoon and a public holiday.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation and alluding a little bit on this huge continent, Eurasia. I hope you can see the map. That's all that I brought for today. The rest you have to listen to. Because of course it's a huge continent, Eurasia. Of course, if you ask several different people, they would say, look, China and India is not there, but officially Eurasia basically ranges from Lisbon, from Portugal to Hong Kong in China. But I will focus on the region that I know best, and that is, let's say, the post-independent, or what some people would call the post-Soviet space. That what you see on the map, the northern half, including of some Eastern European countries. And why I will do so, not only because I lived there and worked there for many years, also I don't speak the languages so well, but also because this is very specific. You have a continent that massively transformed in the 1990s after the end of the Cold War. The Cold War had more impact on that continent and the security dilemma than any other continent in the world. But again, mostly what is the former socialist communist era. And where you see the little red spot, that is the tiny country of Kyrgyzstan. Not everybody has ever heard about it. The OSCE Academy, OSCE is a large political organization for security and cooperation in Europe. It has 57 member states. Almost all the northern states that you see on the map are actually member of that state. And this brought me a little bit into this webinar here, talking about specific security dilemma after transition in the 1990s from an autocratic state, a totalitarian state, the former Soviet Union, but even the Eastern European countries were totalitarian dictatorships. And the security dilemma and how feminist peacemaking, careful here, it's not peace building, it's peacemaking I'm talking about, because there is hardly any peace building. So the particularities about this security dilemma we found in these regions is, when you see on the map, you see a lot of borders there in countries in the northern part, but they are often new countries. So what security researchers say today is that state building, nation state building has never been completed in the region. And you can imagine, if you do not even have a state that is complete and manifested, and I'm sure we will hear after my talk, we will hear later from our colleague from the Ukraine, probably more in detail what this matters, particular for Central Europe, for Ukraine, which is currently in war because of that. But the other countries in the former Soviet Union, if you want to say, face similar dilemmas: no state building, no determined state building, no security. And what has this to do with women? What one can summarize, and I was looking a little bit into the writing and the research also of my colleagues, I said, well, this unfinished nation state building in this huge continent left a lot of security gaps. And these gaps were filled sort of by not only by organized crime. The organized criminals are basically controlling the security sector because the nation states, the states, are dysfunctional. They do not protect. At the same time, sort of what some people would call traditions come in. Traditions, religion with some, I don't like to talk here necessarily about religion, but sort of traditional habits also on how, particularly the view on women. So today, whether you go to Uzbekistan, to Kazakhstan, or to the Caucasus, or even to Russia, often when women express particularly their security issues, which is domestic violence, which is systematic exclusion based on patriarchy, but it is also verbal violence, physical violence, I already mentioned. It's systematic violence and often excused by so-called traditional values that nobody knows what that is. And secondly, and here comes the security, the societal security dilemma in particular, what is sort of in general for these regions, that when a woman claims to be a subject of systematic discrimination and violence, that no police officer would pick up the phone. There is, and this is just to start with, even if the systematic violence against women is reported, there is no rule of law. So there is no accountability mechanisms. I generalize here. We have, of course, exceptions, but in general, that is something that you can see in all the former countries that transited in the 1990s and the 2000s. So it's not only patriarchy, that's a big buzzword, but it's sort of certain also security tradition. And that is often what it's called societal security dilemma. The nation state, the state cannot protect particular women in conflict. We also have what we call here, but I think all over the world, you have the term frozen conflicts, which are currently burning. I always say there is a big meltdown of conflict, whether it is in Central Europe, and we will hear more about the war, of course, the terrible war in Ukraine. But we have that also in the Caucasus. We have it where you see the red spot. In Central Asia, we have ongoing conflicts, and women particularly suffer of it because there is no protection. Quite the opposite. Traditionally, women are considered collateral damages. So now comes the second part of my my talk that I want to focus on, and that is what is helping, what's happening there, if there is any particular female focus, woman focus, or what's called feminist peacemaking. First of all, there's a lot happening there. Women have a general awareness that there are sort of particular victim not only of traditional ways of looking at their suffering, but also that there is no rule of law that can protect them. By no means. So there's a lot of grassroots initiatives, but since the state in this, again, whether it's Kazakhstan or if it's Russia or if it's Azerbaijan or Kyrgyzstan, where I live for many years, there is no state security sector that protects women in particular. So the only agencies that come in the regions are international organizations. Or whether these are NGOs or governmental organizations like the United Nations. Now here it comes, whether in Western Europe or even for Central Europe, we have several organizations who would have take initiatives, even take cases up of women in particular. When you go to this huge continent that you see there, the countries, there is no international organization that is sort of has a political mandate to intervene. There is only the OSCE and the United Nations. The OSCE is a political binding organization for security and cooperation, not a legally binding, so it doesn't have any enforcement mechanisms. However, there are, I would say now, thousands of different initiatives. I can say that, I think for sure. Across the region, you would call them informal initiatives, yeah? What we are hearing about the case of Colombia, where international organizations, sometimes donor organizations, but also international like UN or Organization of American States, here it would be the OSCE, come in and do grassroots works, help women initiatives to actually make their claim and cause. The maximum that can be done at these initiatives is first building networks, particularly for women, to, let's say, make peace. Again, peace building is a different category. Or aiming to lobby, I must say, very weak states to change laws and to change what we would call rule of law initiatives. So they are in a way, and this is why it's called societal security dilemma, because there is a dysfunctional statehood for women, even if the laws are there to protect women or to include women systematically in peacemaking and even peace building, as we see in Central Asia, Caucasus, or in Eastern and Central Europe, the state is not responding to the laws because the state is dysfunctional. So women are often on their own and depend completely on international help and donors. Nevertheless, they are very well organized locally, that one has to say. And here comes in probably also a legacy of the former, even so totalitarian and dictatorial state, the Soviet Union, where organized groups actually exist, even if they were top-down organized. But there is sort of a women network. So if there is any initiative, it's grassroots. And from the international level, you have sort of support and help, either organizational wise or even financial. Now comes the thing. What we can call their feminist peacemaking, we could also summarize as local and local. And it might sound a little bit analytic here and very theoretical, but if you want, or if anybody wants to make a difference in particular for women and in the securitization field, then one has to understand that the state is dysfunctional and not responding. So police is not responding, courts are not responding, let alone parliaments, governments are not responding, border controls are not responding. And a woman is considered property of a man, and that is practiced. So when women get systematically beaten, violated, even abducted, the police would not intervene. In quite the opposite. It's all the woman's fault. There is another interesting element that would help to take this assessment and analysis further, and that is the very high suicide rate, for instance, among girls and women in this region. I don't want to generalize, don't get me wrong here, please. And I'm sure you have many examples of the opposite, but this is the general data when you look in the reporting. So it's basically what a colleague summarized. It's a local struggle, local network struggle of women for international recognition, trying to put pressure on the governments to change their not only laws but also behavior. And I don't want to extend this for too long here, and I want to leave it there, and maybe there are some questions. But I would conclude, as long as there is no functioning statehood in the region of the former autocratic states, which now claim to be democratic, women's security is at stake. I leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja, for a very different view on a very different part of the world. It's slightly more pessimistic, I think, but then again, that also leaves room for, well, maybe not pessimistic, but more realistic, I think, in many respects. I work in Kazakhstan as well quite frequently, so I'm aware of the overall situation. I think this raises a number of questions also with regards to the comparability between the setting in different continents and across the board, but we will get back to that later when we come to the broader discussion. We will now move again back to Latin America, so we're jumping a bit back and forth, but bear with me. We are now moving to Mónica Pinzón González, and I hope that my pronunciation of all the names is correct. My Spanish is very, very, very limited, to say the least. Mónica is a university lecturer and researcher at the University of San Carlos in Guatemala. She is an advisor also on the rights of indigenous peoples and has more than 20 years of experience in academia and also in accompanying of victims of serious human rights violations. She has a specialization in gender studies from the UNAM in Mexico and a PhD in public administration and public policy. She has expertise, as already you could have guessed, in gender-based violence, works with the LGBTIQ+ population, and is a psychosocial and forensic expert for cases of sexual violence in Cambodia and the armed conflict in Guatemala, as well as Colombia. She's also a member of the United Nations International Network for the Investigation of Gender Crimes and Sexual Violence, where she has worked in Colombia, and she has published multiple scientific articles and research in English, Spanish, and also German. So, Mónica, we're very much looking forward to your experiences that you're going to share with us from Guatemala, from a very, again, different context in Latin or Central America, to be more precise. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Muy buenos días a todas y a todos. Reciban un saludo muy grande desde
Good morning,
la
good
tierra
afternoon,
que
everyone.
también les espera, que es
I would like to
Guatemala.
say hello from Guatemala.
Es para mí un
For
honor
me,
el que
it is an honor
L'Oréal me haya invitado y quiero
to
agradecer
have been
también
invited by
a
L'Oréal,
Florentina,
and I also would like to
por la
thank
invitación
Florentina for her
y por supuesto a cada
invitation,
uno de ustedes.
and obviously
En
everyone of
aras del
you.
tiempo, empezaré
For the sake of
con
time,
la
let me
presentación.
begin
A
with my
mí me han
presentation
solicitado conversar acerca de las mujeres indígenas como constructoras milenarias de la paz.
about Indigenous women
Quisiera
as
empezar
millennial
diciendo que
peace builders.
las mujeres indígenas
Indigenous women
también somos tejedoras de vida y de memoria ancestral.
we
Quisiera
also
empezar
create
resaltando
memory
el
and
liderazgo milenario que ha
we're
sostenido
weavers of
la vida
ancestral
comunitaria,
memory,
y no solo
working for the
en este
community or
espacio
supporting the
ahí sí
community
me
life,
parece
not only
que
Latin
la
America,
compartiré.
but
Este
in the whole
espacio
of
de
planet
liderazgo
Earth.
milenario
This
y de sostener la
millennial
vida comunitaria
space for
ha
leadership and
descansado
support of the community
estas
is
culturas ancestrales,
based on these
las
ancestral
culturas milenarias. Yo hablo
cultures,
desde la cultura
such
maya,
as
y
millennial
todos hablarán
cultures, such as the
desde las
Mayan
culturas
culture,
de sus respectivos
or
países.
whichever culture you have in your
Lastimosamente,
countries.
como en casi todos los
Unfortunately,
espacios, el
as in many
liderazgo
other
se ha visto
instances, leadership
obviamente reprimido.
has been
Y
repressed.
dentro de los procesos históricos hemos
And throughout
atravesado
historical processes, we
explotación,
have
genocidio
suffered
y, por
invasions,
supuesto,
genocides,
graves violaciones de
and
derechos humanos que tenemos
serious
acá
violations of the human
en
rights.
Guatemala con un
And
conflicto
that
armado
is, of course, the case of Guatemala
que
with an
dejó
armed conflict
muchísimo daño
that
a la
left
sociedad
behind a lot
y, por
of
supuesto,
damage
impactos
to the social
importantes
fabric and
en
an
la
important
vida de las
impact in the lives of
Yo
women.
quisiera también resaltar en ese
Let me
sentido
highlight
las mujeres
in this respect as well
cuando han
that
sobrevivido
women,
procesos son
when
más
they have survived a process like this, they are more than just victims. They are peace builders. And indigenous women has proven exceptional resilience that has allowed them to lead peace building processes throughout the generations. It's not a secret that women seek peace in the world and justice as well. We see this in Guatemala, we see this in Colombia, Cambodia, and mainly, I think I would say 90% it is women who are seeking and looking for justice and peace processes. And I would like to highlight as well that they are the guardians of the traditions and the ancestral knowledge. They are also creators of culture, not just the reproducers of the culture, because it's not enough to convey this knowledge, but also to recreate it. In the case of Guatemala, we have 36 years of armed conflict, and it is clear that this has had a huge impact in the lives of women. 83% of the victims are Mayan victims, according to the historical commission, the History Commission, with different sorts of violence, such as sexual violence or torture. Guatemala suffered an internal war that affected the social fabric, but also the lives of indigenous women, and they suffered atrocious violence that left a psychological and social trauma that continues from one generation to the next. In spite of having suffered all this pain, they remain strong in their culture. And in this respect, I would like to highlight as well that indigenous women are also political stakeholders in peace-building processes. In the case of Guatemala, we have an important example because most of the atrocities that happen during armed conflicts are seen in trial in international courts, but not so many in national courts. And in Guatemala, there's been a trial according to Convention 169 and self-government is one of the ways you can exert your own justice, self-justice. And when women implement this self-justice, resolutions or judgments are more harmonious than when these judgments are given by men. And this places these women as indigenous authorities, but also as women, as peace-building women, defending their territories, claiming their rights, and following historical leadership based on memory. For indigenous peoples, justice is seen from that ancestral point of view versus a Western justice they had to submit to in order to seek reparation for the damage that was caused to them and their families and the communities. So indigenous women are also agents of change defending their rights. We have the emblematic case of Supursarco with a ruling back in 2016 related to domestic slavery. It was recognized by the National Court that there were serious harm and damage to the life projects of women. This damage, this harm, and of course the consequences thereof required more than 20 expert assessments. One of them was made by me, the social expertise, where I proved that women had also suffered a complex trauma, domestic slavery and sexual slavery, and damage to their physical and mental integrity. In this trial, the defendants were members of the armed forces and military personnel. The repair of these violations require funds that not all countries can provide or implement, apart from the political will, of course, as you all know. So Saprosarco is a milestone of transitional justice because this ruling recovers truth, memory, and the repair. Some of them have been implemented and have been effective. Also, I would like to mention that justice for indigenous women has involved honoring ancestral memory, seeking reparation from this cosmogonic approach, this spiritual and cultural and territorial approach, but also it has involved the design of policies for peace, pushing from the local level policies that include the following generations, seeking to heal these historical wounds based on the determination of their own peoples. Regarding ancestral knowledge and peace practices, I would like to mention resistant ritual, community networks, and harmonization. These are three different instances where women have contributed as political stakeholders and social stakeholders. Regarding justice and peace as justice and memory and self-determination, we face institutional racism, the government patriarchy, the weakness of the repairs, the criminalization, and we also need the role of universities to be bridges recognizing the indigenous epistemology as a source of knowledge in process of peace building and justice, and also promoting alliances between indigenous women to co-create and design policies based on collective rights. And finally, let me finish with 3 key learnings, which are the importance of a contextual and intercultural approach, also the centrality of memory and the centrality of the victims, and thirdly, the transgenerational impact of the trauma to be able to work on it with the need of holistic psychosociological approaches. 4th, resilience in spite of the damage. And 5, starting to investigate the pillars for survival, not only the victims. Finally, I would like to end by saying that everything is alive and everything has a heart. From the different, the various indigenous ways, and in Guatemala with the Mayan culture, everything is alive, everything has a heart. Thank you so much, Monica Pinzon from Guatemala, at your service, and see you in Colombia. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you. Muchas gracias, Monica. Thank you very much for joining us. Especially, I know that it's even earlier in Guatemala than it is in Colombia and in Argentina. So thank you for getting up very early in the morning and joining us here today for this important discussion. We will now move again back to Europe. To Ukraine, which, as you all know, is currently still in a state of war and suffering from the Russian aggression against the country. And we move to Professor Olena Chepelyuk, who is the rector of the Kherson National Technical University in Ukraine. She holds a PhD in technical sciences and is a professor of the design department. She was the winner of the President of the Ukraine Prize for Young Scientists in 2012 and the National Prize of Ukraine in 2021 as well as of Women of Ukraine National Awards nominee in 2025 in the field of higher education. After graduating from Kherson National University in 1999, Olena has been involved in teaching and scientific activity at her alma mater, at both with textile technologies and then at the design chair from May 2022 till April 2023. She was the acting rector, and in 2023, so when the war was already going on in Ukraine, she was elected as, formally also elected as rector of the university. Having headed Kherson National University at the time of its relocation, the university had to be displaced from Kherson to Khmelnytsky in summer 2022 due to the war and the ongoing aggression. She retained the staff, formed a new management team, and ensured that the operations and education processes went on smoothly. Currently, she is continuing to work on the university transformation, and she combines management duties with teaching, delivering lectures for design students, and is actively involved into scientific activity. The scope of her interests embrace theoretical problems of fabric design and fabric transformation processes on textile design, felting, and so on and so forth, but also questions of psychological aspects of teaching under the current challenging circumstances, first COVID and then the war and then online teaching. She is also the organizing committee general chair of the International Scientific and Practical Conference called Synergy of Science and Business in the Post-War Restoration of the Kherson region, which started in 2022 and which then grew into a biannual international event devoted to the reconstruction of Ukraine once the war is finished. Olena, thank you so much for joining us especially in these very hard times in Ukraine. And we are very much looking forward to hear your experiences in the specific Ukrainian context. Thank you and welcome to the group.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen correctly? Yeah, it's okay. So I want to say you to imagine a rector of university. And when I say it, you have picture on your mind. And I'm sure that this picture like this, maybe this picture like this. And I'm sure that just few of you imagine somebody like this. Yes, we want to say that many years it was believed that only men could lead large enterprises and institutions. But times are changing. Today, women are taking more and more leadership positions. Today, we can be presidents, rectors, and CEO. Is it good, bad? I think it's fair because leadership has no gender. You are either professional or not. So, about me, yes, I'm professor, I'm doctor of science, I'm rector of university. And why did I choose to speak on this topic today? Because I don't know how to be a leader in theory. I live with it every day. So there was one very telling moment in my life. Once I was invited in conference, and organizer of conference came to the stage and he said, right now you will see professor. I came and stand near him and he speak about what I've done, about everything I have. And one audience just asked, oh, okay, and where is professor? All my life, a lot of people just see through me and try to find real professor. So I didn't stop. I just did my job all my life. And I want to say that in Ukraine, we have situation and it's this situation improving. As you can see, in 2014, we had 9% of rectors, women rectors, and today we have 17%. And yes, it's better, but it's still not 50%. So we move in this direction. There is stereotypes that a good leader must be a man. There is a stereotype that woman is really emotional and it's hard for her to do under the pressure. But I think we will change it. And about my university, I want to say that when war has begun, we have leading team. You can see it on the slide. And as you can see, it's rector Yuri Bardachov and 4 main managers of our university, where 3 from 4 were men. And these team decided to stay in Kherson when enemy came in my town. We were first town who was corrupted by Russia, and they decided to stay in Kherson because they had understand that our students need to have possibility to get into the next degree, and they need to have their diploma, and all our employees need to have their salary. So they stayed in Kherson and they finished the year of our educational year. And me, was removed in another town. It's safe town in the middle of Ukraine. It's Khmelnytsky, and we thought that days that it will be maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months maximum. After that, we will come into Kherson. But you know, war not finished, so we had a necessity to build and to do new team. As you see, rector is woman, first vice rector is woman, and chief bookkeeper, all head of departments, and 3 or 4 deans women. And we hadn't goal to build women university. It's just it's just women who take responsibility for our university on there. And some words about our relocation. We began in another city. It was city Khmelnytsky, and right now, as you know, we have a new team and we work in new place. And this is our buildings in Kherson. All buildings have some damaged. We don't have windows, but we have strong will to come back. And right now I want to do some experiment. I want you to think that you are rector of displaced university. What will you do? You need to build new strategy. And you need to build this strategy, and you need to understand that Ukrainian university have all challenges which have universities in the world. Do you know what what AI will do? Do you know how we will change educational system with AI? You do know that technical really evaluating, and we need to teach about something new, and we don't have this knowledge yet. We have this problem. We have the same problems, but we have problems about war. You know, we need to build strategy, but we do understand that our strategy really depends on situation in Ukraine. My town is near Russians. It's just 2 kilometers to the enemy. We have parts of town where we can't be because it's really dangerous. What it will be? If it will be 3 scenario, bad one. If situation will remain frozen and our enemy will stay near the Kherson. Second one is better. If part of Kherson and part of Kherson region, it's 70% of our region will be deoccupied. It will be better. And best one, if all Ukraine and if Crimea will be free. And it's 3 different future for us. And you know, you are rector of this university. You don't know what enterprises will be in Kherson after the war. What professions will we need after the war? And how many Kherson people will come back after the war? What will you do? It is just a theoretical question. I do understand that you don't have questions, but if you do have, just write for me, please help us. But we live We study, we love our students, and we keep them in strong community. And I want to say that I'm not the only one. You see three beautiful women. They all are rectors of universities. Olena Khadjinova and Natalia Falco, they are rectors of displaced university. And they doing great job every day, and they are doing everything that their university will survive, will stand. And Tatiana Kaganovskaya, she is rector of Kharkiv Karazin University. And Kharkiv is a town near the border, so they have a big problems, and her university is really strong now despite all problems that they have. So I want to say that we have a beautiful future, and we will we will survive. I want to say that Ukrainian expertise is not unique. I want to say that global studies show that in time of crisis, teams with greater gender diversity demands higher resilience and effectiveness. I want to say that if women is a leader of some organization, this organization show more balanced decisions, adapt more quickly to change, and maintain stronger international connection. So I want to say that today we all build beautiful and strong Ukraine. I note that today main for us to stay leaders and to stay professionals. Professionals doesn't have gender. You are professional or you not. So we are staying, and if it will be interesting for you, I will answer your question after we finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olena, for this experience from Ukraine, and thank you for also holding on and trying to continue what you do in the exiled Kherson University at the moment. I can imagine that it must still be very difficult, but it is good to see that the institutions are still flourishing or are still working, because that also provides a sense of stability to citizens and to students, I think. We will now, from Ukraine, move again back to Colombia. Where we are joined by Dr. Professor Stefan Peters, so same first name as mine, but a different family name. Stefan is a professor for international relations and peace studies at the Justus Liebig University of Gießen in Germany, and since 2018 also the director of the Instituto Colombo Alemán para la Paz in Bogota, in Colombia. Before he went to Colombia, he had a very extensive experience in different Latin American countries. He did a research day in Uruguay when he was still doing his PhD. But he also had visiting professorships in Argentina, in Cuba, and in Puerto Rico. So he's quite familiar with Latin America as a continent, as well as in South Africa. But since 2018, he has been mostly working in Colombia, also with regards to this German-Colombian Peace Center, that is a network of German and Colombian universities trying to, well, let's say, assist the peace process that is ongoing in the country after the long civil war. And we're looking forward to what Stefan has to share with us on the question of the role of women and gender in this peace process in particular. Thank you, Stefan, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Thank you all colleagues and all those who are assisting this webinar, and well, especially right now talking after you, Olena. Thank you also very much for your talk, which was really, I think, very important to get more information about the situation in Ukraine, especially, for instance, here in Latin America, where we are sometimes kind of far away. So what I want to share with you today is, well, talking about a situation in Colombia, basically based on the advances, but also the challenges for peace building. And at the end, I would like to give some ideas we here at the Capaz Institute were discussing or are discussing what universities could do in order to at least, yes, perhaps accompany a better situation for feminist peace building. And this in a context in Colombia where we do have a peace agreement from 2016 between the government and the FARC guerrilla after a decades-long and very violent conflict. On the other hand, we also still have ongoing conflicts in a lot of different regions in the country. So I would like to start first with a little bit of context. For instance, we could see it also in the presentation of Monica Tatiana that all over Colombia we have really strong women's movements. And these women's movements are mainly working in the field of peace, especially when we have a concept of positive peace. And these women movements were also responsible for pushing in the peace negotiations in Havana between the government and the FARC guerrilla the issue of gender into the peace negotiation and into the final agreement. So there is a lot of indicators, a lot of discussion about, or a lot of goals related to gender and peace building in the peace agreement. I will come to that in a minute. On the other hand, we also have a quite comprehensive transitional justice system right now in Colombia. Some might argue we have the South African moment right now in Colombia. So everyone around the world in transitional justice is talking about Colombia, wants to study Colombia. And actually, if we think about gender in transitional justice, it is on the one hand, in the final report of the Truth Commission, there was a whole chapter on gender which talked about patriarchy as one of the causes of the violent conflict, and also about the particular affectation of women, but also about LGBTIQ plus persons. And we also have in the judicial body of the transitional justice right now a case on gender-based violence, sexualized violence, and also violence based on discrimination, where there is once again an issue about sexual violence, for instance, against women, but also against men. And I think this is also an important point because there's often a kind of a taboo. And right now, in the ongoing conflicts and peace negotiations, there's also a legacy of bringing more women into the negotiation table. And that all in a context where Colombia and the current government 2 years roughly ago started what is called feminist foreign policy. And I will not go into details here, but the principles of the Colombian version of feminist foreign policy is participation. So basically working together with grassroots movements. It's a pacifist agenda and an intersectional agenda, and bringing these together according to the government, this is a transformative objective of the feminist foreign policy. And one of the areas, others are probably pretty much linked to them, is the so-called total peace. At least for, it might sound a little bit weird for some ears, but that's paz total in Spanish, how it's called here, and is one of the main focus areas of this feminist foreign policy. However, main challenges, lack of resources for this feminist foreign policy. So there is roughly $250,000 a year for it. And also the question of cross-party political support. And we will have elections next year here in Colombia, and we will see, depending, of course, what will be the outcome of the elections, what will be the future also of this feminist foreign policy. So now I would like to go into some challenges. So first, four main challenges. First, implementation of the peace agreement. Second, participation, real participation. Third, in the field of transitional justice, and last but not least, also gender-related issues at the negotiation table. So first, if we look at data about implementation of the peace agreement, what we can see is that these issues which are related to gender topics are basically falling behind. So in a recent publication, this is from the Kroc Institute from Notre Dame University in the US, and Yoshi, who works in the team of the Kroc Institute, she argues, well, implementation of gender provisions in the 2016 Colombian Peace Agreement is significantly behind other issues with no gender topics. And my colleague from Germany, from University of Marburg, Annika Oettler, she did a research on the gender topics in the peace agreement, and she argues, well, there is a large number, but of different issues, but these are not that much concrete, and it's hard to operationalize them. So there is a risk, and we see that it's not only a risk, but what's happening, that they are sidelined in the implementation. Second problem was regarding to participation in peace building. So we have different obstacles or barriers. And they are pretty much linked to structural inequalities, having in mind that Colombia is one of the most unequal societies in the world. And these inequalities also are very pronounced related gender relation. There is, especially for those, we have to have in mind that most victims come from marginalized indigenous, peasant or Afro-Colombian communities living in remote areas or being displaced into the shanty towns of the big cities. And there is a problem of lack of material resources, but also information in order to have real participation. But participation, there's also an obstacle related to the gendered division of work and especially care work. So do we have, for instance, the possibility to have money for giving women, especially, the opportunity to participate, and who cares, for instance, for the children or the elderly, having in mind that men are very much reluctant to do so. And we also see that there is often a lack of interest of institutions, and probably not the same way as you mentioned, Anya, but we also see that there are important gatekeepers in institutions related to the peace agreement who are not or seem to be not that much interested in bringing these gender issues into the debates and pushing them forward. And there is also a critique of the representation in the feminist foreign policy. So, which kind of women are the women who are at the powerful positions? We have to admit or say that there are people or women from historically marginalized groups, but the main or the majority is rather middle class or upper class from the big cities. Coming to transitional justice, also I wanted to mention here is the same situation with the participation of marginalized victims in the mechanisms. I here draw on the work of Laura Rivera Revelo. We could also argue that there is important let's say, challenge to bring intersectional approaches into the transitional justice institutions. That is here from a recent doctoral thesis of Juliana González Villamizar. We can see also that there is a reluctance of perpetrators to provide truths, especially related to sexual violence. So perpetrators or supposed perpetrators do recognize all kind of atrocities, but not sexual violence. And there is still a question, I think that is also something similar to what Monica shared with us. What kind of reparations will we have, especially in the restorative transitional justice mechanism? And how can we understand, or what kind of gender sensitive collective reparations can we imagine? And last but not least, regarding to the current negotiation tables in this total peace, well, the focus is generally on short-term security issues. And there is a lack of gendered analysis of security. And there is also a kind of lack of transformative gender approaches in the negotiation table. So we have representation of women, but not necessarily this means that there is a gender analysis, let's say, at the center of the peace negotiations. Now, what can we do in universities? I will just, distinguish here between what we do in universities, research, teaching, and, third mission. So what are, first of all, more research into what are crucial topics in peace building from a gender analysis. And that has to be, of course, context sensitive. And once again, I deal here, or I build on the argument of Annika Oetler. Secondly, having more gendered perspective on security, which also means masculinity studies. I think this is also something we should have in mind, and perhaps do more work on that. And also more empirical research on, and again, not only transitional justice, but transformative justice related to, especially here, probably a transformative gender approach in transitional justice. In teaching, what we can still see, and that is actually what female victim organization tell us, what they would like to have as reparation is getting more access to higher education. Probably not for themselves, but rather for their children and families, especially access to quality higher education and affordable higher education in remote areas in the country where most of the victims do live. Also strengthening, once again, the approach from gender studies and security studies, at least here, but I'm quite sure that it's not only an issue from Latin America or Colombia. Security studies tend to be very much masculinized. And and the third point, I think, related what we can do in third mission is, of course, what also Monica told us. I think in Colombia and Latin America, and generally, at least compared to Germany, universities are much more active in working with communities and being very much involved in these community processes, working more on that. Then, as there is also a huge debate on science diplomacy for peace, asking us, well, okay, science diplomacy, but what does it mean? What could be, for instance, an approach of a feminist science diplomacy, having in mind representation of women, but not only representation, but also resources, also the aspect of the topics which we would prioritize in science diplomacy, and having in mind realities that not all women have the same realities. Well, and here I'm, of course, talking about intersectional approaches. And last but not least, also training on feminist peace policies, both for diplomats, but also for practitioners from different state authorities, especially working in the field of peace building. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me, and I feel I'm really happy to be here, and hopefully we will have time to discuss.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for this insight in the work that you've been doing together with colleagues in Colombia and the overarching questions related to that. Just a word, just a short word, because there were questions also in the chat regarding participation from Africa. We have tried, both Florencia and myself, we've tried to get speakers from Africa, both from Ethiopia and also from other countries. We were looking to a particular program at the University of Addis Ababa, which is related to peace building and construction, and where a lot of the graduates later work with the international community present in Addis Ababa or work with the African Union on those more institutionalized approaches. Unfortunately, they were not available, and the other African speaker we were looking to have today obviously had problems with connectivity. We were thinking shortly before we started, that she would be able to join. Apparently she didn't. This by no means is meant to imply that we didn't want to plan to look on issues of women in Africa, especially with regards to peace building and resilience. But yeah, we have unfortunately not been able to get a speaker from there to participate with us today. We hope that this can be changed for the discussion that we're going to have in Bogota later this year, obviously. Now, before we go, I have some questions prepared, but I would like to ask all the other participants whether anyone feels they have a question that they would like to ask. You can switch on your microphone and your camera. You can say who you are, where you're from, and then you can pose your question, or you can write it also into the chat if you like. If you do so for the Spanish, if you write in Spanish, I will need some time to translate it because that's not something I understand automatically. But we can try to make this as participatory as possible. So are there any questions from any of the participants at this point in time?
Stefan,
Yes.
Stefan, there is one question in the chat. It's in Spanish, so I'm gonna read it in Spanish.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Víctor Ortega consulta cuál ha sido el papel
So which has been the role of the state when protecting or advocating indigenous peoples in Guatemala? This is a question for Monica.
No sé si quieres prender tu
Monica,
micrófono.
do you want to answer? Yes, thank you very much, Florencia.
Le he contestado un poco también escrito.
So I also
y le he comentado
answered.
tenemos un
I
estado aún
have written an answer. So there is an oscillating state between omission and structural lack. And what we've done in protection-wise, is the participation and recognition of rights also for indigenous women. So in conclusion, I would say that it still has to be abided by, but there is a small percentage and 60% more to go. And as Stefan said, I wanted to underline that regarding repair, every case is different. It's not the same Colombia with the peace and transitional justice to different cases where there has been some repair rulings. And so the first element would be the symbolic public recognition of the harm, and women who are surviving say so, and the relatives to clean up the name so to say, the family name, this public recognition, but also who is to blame. And this is still pending, so to say. So there are some elements that show who is not to blame, but we need to know who is to blame. The fatal victims and the survival, like in sexual violence cases. So this public recognition of the crime and the fight and this battle of these women, these victims. The restitution and rehabilitation measures must be in line with the people. And we can see the sanctions and the repair. And most of the victims say that the government, the state, has to give them some real repair. And it has to, this reparation, the needs of women have to be repaired. And this is the important thing when we talk about reparation. Where are the pensions and the health insurance? Something that they have never had. This is why we still have to move forward in telling this. The victims need other things. The harm, the pain, how are they going to repair this harm, this pain? And this is what we are going to do regarding protection and also collective repair. And it is important to talk about this collective reparation. Answering the question. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Mónica.
Thank you very much,
Respecto a
Monica.
otros comentarios que
Vis-a-vis
surgieron
other
en el
remarks
chat
that
y
were
preguntas
done
que nos han
on the
dejado
chat and some
en
questions
relación
that
a la
were
falta de
asked
representatividad
regarding
ya en
the
este
lack of
webinar de
representativity
mujeres
of
africanas,
African
queremos,
women.
como que Stefan ya lo
As
mencionó,
Stefan
no solo
mentioned,
intentamos
we
conseguir, sino que teníamos confirmada una cita
had
para hoy,
a
que
speaker
es
for today,
Meshkele,
Emude
quizás la conocen, la
Meshkele, maybe
directora de
you
la
know
Comisión
her,
de
she's
Derechos
our
Humanos de
director
Etiopía.
of the Commission of Human
Lamentablemente
Rights in
ocurre
Ethiopia,
que con
but
África hay problemas de
there are
conexión y
some
hay veces que la gente
connection
no se puede conectar.
problems, and
Lamentablemente ocurrió eso en el día de
unfortunately,
hoy,
this is what
pero estaba
happened
previsto que
today.
tuviera una
But
participante en
she was
representatividad
supposed
de mujeres
to
africanas.
be
Así que
here
quería aclarar eso en
representing
nombre de
African
Obreal también.
women. I wanted to say
No sé
that
si
on
hay otras
behalf of Obreal.
preguntas.
Are there any
Acá
other
en el chat veo
questions?
otra pregunta.
There's another question here in
Larissa,
the
this is
chat.
a question for Dr. Anja. What is the difference between peace building and peacemaking? And what have been the implication of women in peace building despite the lack of rule to protect women in time of war?
Thank you very much. Try to make it brief. Peacemaking is really this before peace building. It's because you have to sort of work towards peace. For instance, the peace process would be peacemaking. And then once you have this peace, you build on the condition. Peace that is built on ceasefire or peace that is built on absence of violence is very different peace. So you have different peace building processes. Just a general notion about making. And why I made the distinction in my talk was because in the active conflict zones in Eurasia, where we also talk about war zones, and that is not only in Central Europe, it's also in Central Asia, it's in Caucasus, and if you go down to Afghanistan, of course, you have real war and conflict, violent conflict scenarios. There you see efforts of peacemaking. They are not even beyond the state of violence. So peace building is not even an issue there. And even in the peacemaking, and again, please bear with me, it's very general what I'm saying, very, very general over Eurasia. even in the peacemaking process, women play no role. Very general spoken. It's not a systematic inclusion. And one of the reasons that is given if it's tradition, not to mix it up with religion. Of the argument we receive, and I work in this field. I'm also a trainer. I'm an educator, and often what we hear from the counterparts is that is not the tradition. And I can say even one more example, and I think it resonates a little bit with what we've heard from Guatemala or from Colombia. Even women themselves in the peacemaking process, they often say, and here I quote, "We women are resilient. This is we women from Central Asia, we women from Caucasus, we are strong, we are resilient." And I always say, look, I don't know if this is resilience if you don't change the situation. Because what you mean by strength often is endurance. And endurance is not necessarily change. And this is often in the peacemaking process, it is mind-boggling. It's really irritating for external observers. Again, please bear with me. This is exceptions. But there are exceptions, of course. But when and I worked for many years now in the different peacemaking processes, there is no systematic inclusion of women in the process. And then you had the implication of women in peacebuilding despite the lack of rule and protect women in times of war. That's a little bit what I said. There are many women initiatives, many female initiatives, and we've heard also now in Ukraine the situation there is multi-level, of course. But even if we go further east, a lot of female and women initiative, but I have not seen any initiative, not one, really in conflict areas or when we talk about systematic rape, abduction of women. It's a huge issue in Eurasia, abduction of women and girls, the bride kidnapping, and it's called a tradition. It's basically abduction and systematic rape. That there are a lot of women initiatives, but the ones you see who somehow reach the surface and have maybe a little bit of impact on the national level, on legislation, let's say, on government, are supported by international organizations and donors. And I'm not sure if this is always so effective. That would be for a different discussion. I have also done some research on that. But I'm just, hopefully this is a short answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja, again, also for making clear, pointing out that that difference between peacemaking and peace building. Are there any other questions from the group? Maybe not at this point in time. Then I would have a question maybe to all panelists, and then we can, because as you know, as we have said in the beginning, this webinar is also meant to prepare a little bit for the interregional dialogue to be held in Bogota early November this year. And on a more general level, to all of you, what would you feel is the role of universities to collaborate with civil society to promote gender justice or gender-based justice in a post-conflict or still ongoing conflict regions? And what would be the messages that you would want us to take or issues you would like us to zoom in during the discussion that we will have in Bogota in November? Please. Any one of the speakers has an opinion on that one? Stefan,
well, I think I tried to include it a little bit into my presentation, but I think first of all we have to ask ourselves what we can do, where we are strong in university. And so first and foremost, this is probably research. However, here is also the question, what kind of research do we want to do? What kind of questions do we ask? How do we do this research? Is it a kind of an extractive research, or is it more collaborative research? What kind of methods do we apply? And is it research which is meaningful for communities, or where we can co-produce? Which also, I think there are some structural limits. So if it's, for instance, a PhD thesis, in the end, probably not the whole community will be awarded with a PhD. But also, I think with the reaction of Monica, more trans-regional or transnational research, I think this would also be an option. And the other question, I think, Monica, you raised this issue, what is excellence? And for instance, well, as Stefan, you are from the DAD, I know that there is this discussion. What is really the excellent student? Is it those students who have always had the opportunities to get excellence according to a rather Occidental idea, or might it be other ideas about excellence? And especially, how could we have also affirmative action for those who have never had opportunities? And last but not least, I think, well, the issues in third mission, where universities could really or are doing a lot of different things, but I think sometimes this is seen as a nice to have, and I think we could perhaps institutionalize these opportunities to work, for instance, with both with communities, but also trying to get more or being more active in science diplomacy, and once again with the question, what kind of or what kind of messages can we bring into these debates? Who can speak, who not? Who should be here in the discussions, for instance, with decision makers?
Okay, other opinions on that?
Can I say some words? I agree that our first mission is to do research and to do everything about science. But I want to say that we can upbringing our students, and we just show them respect to women and to the man, and I think that it changed it. And I want to say about Ukraine, we will have, and we have right now, students with different I don't know how to say it, historical they had they had different situation, and so they have different background. So everybody in Ukraine need to be a psychologist, and our tutors need to be psychologists, just to help to our students who have a terrible background. Because sometimes I give lecture and I give small question, and it's really not important questions, and somebody can just cry. Why? I don't know. It's just because his history and because his background. So I think our students have PTSD, so we need to be psychologists for them. Small remark.
Okay, thank you. So the universities also need to be places to provide stability and psychosocial support to students, especially when the conflict is still ongoing. Thank you very much also for reminding us of that. I was wondering, Monica, other speakers, do you have any ideas or any messages or topics you would like to raise for the event in Bogota?
Si me permite un momentito. Gracias. Creo que sigue
I
pendiente
think that
el
there's still
reconocer las
something missing
epistemologías
to
indígenas.
recognize the indigenous
Concretamente, en el
epistemologies.
mundo somos
So in the world, we are
476 millones, por eso nos
476
hablan de que
million,
somos
and this is
minoría
why they say
mundial.
we are a
Pero si
minority.
hablamos en Colombia o Guatemala, donde
We focus on
somos
Guatemala
muchos,
or in
entonces nosotros
Colombia,
decimos qué
we are a
minoría y
great
qué minoría,
majority.
porque
We are
nosotros
not a
somos
minority.
muchos.
We are a
Sin
great number
embargo,
of
a
people.
nivel mundial
But
seguimos
at
siendo
global
pocos.
level, we are a
Entonces creo
minority.
que el
So I
reconocimiento de
truly
esas
believe that the
epistemologías
recognition of these
indígenas
epistemologies,
como fuente legítima de
indigenous
conocimiento,
epistemologies, as
sí
sources of
debería ser
knowledge,
un tema que se
should
puede
be
incorporar
something
en términos
to be
de
included
lo que toca en Bogotá
in
para
Bogota
ir reflexionando también
to
internamente
reflect
con las
upon
universidades.
this,
Y
and
en
maybe
este
to include it in
sentido,
university studies.
casi siempre en todas las investigaciones lo han dicho,
And
desde
all
los pueblos
researchers say
originarios
so.
se hace la investigación,
We
se
can
extrae
do the
efectivamente
research,
y
we can
extractivismo del
extract it,
conocimiento,
there is a
pero
knowledge
no necesariamente
extraction,
evolución,
but not
co-creación y diseño,
return and
o
co-creation
reconocimiento como
or
tal de que ese
recognition
conocimiento, por
per
supuesto, que es
se.
válido y por supuesto que es legítimo. Entonces, me
So
parece que ese
I
podría ser un
think that
tema
this could be
importante que se
something to
puede
be
colocar
included.
y a lo interno en nuestras
And also
universidades
in our own
seguir
universities
trabajando
to
porque existan
keep on
cursos,
working so
porque
that
exista
there
también
are
diálogo en
courses
donde
and
se
there is still
incorpore estos
dialogue in
conocimientos.
which we
Porque cuando
incorporate this
hablamos de pueblos
knowledge.
originarios
When we
se
talk
habla
about
tanto de la
peoples and
pertenencia
indigenous
cultural,
peoples and we
no
talk
digámosle lo
about
mismo
cultural
como si acá nos
belonging, I'm
obligan a
not
hablar
mentioning
nuestro propio
language
idioma o nos sugieren
and our
hablar en
own
nuestro propio
language.
idioma. Se quedan a la hora de hacer las
So
intervenciones académicas
sometimes
realmente muy
they
limitadas
are
y vamos a
very
decir
limited and
demasiado
left behind
especializadas, entonces
and
ofrecen
put
algo
out of
opcional
context.
sin mucho que
So,
ofrecer. Más bien llegan a aprender algunos procesos
so it's
en las
important to learn
comunidades
these
locales.
processes in the
Y
communities,
esto
in the
no solo
indigenous
en Guatemala, lo he
communities,
visto en
not
varios de
only
los
in
países
Guatemala, but
de
also in
Latinoamérica,
other
en
countries in
donde
Latin
puedo
America
contribuir y por
where
supuesto
I've
aportar.
been.
Gracias.
So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica, for bringing up this issue of indigenous knowledge, which for sure is not only an issue in the societies in Latin America, where indigenous peoples actually form the majority of the populations, but also in other parts of the world. I mean, in many African countries, this question of indigenous or traditional African knowledge, especially in the context of research, is a very hot discussion. And it's also a discussion in industrialized countries which still have indigenous peoples like New Zealand, Australia, and also parts of North America, where maybe not the US at this point in time, but in Canada, there's a lot of research being done also on indigenous knowledge and how to create a more equal, let's say, partnership of co-creation rather than extracting indigenous knowledge and then using it for other purposes. So I think that's a relevant discussion to follow up on. Thank you. Other issues that anyone or questions anyone would like to raise?
Stefan,
Yes.
si me permites agregar solo
I would
algo
like to
a
add
la
something
conversación que se venía teniendo, pues coincido
to the
con
conversation.
lo que
I
ya han
agree
mencionado
with what
previamente
has been said,
los compañeros de panel. Me gustaría solo agregar a lo
and
mejor
I would
algo que
like to
pudiéramos
add
seguir conversando y es la generación de
something else,
investigación
the
y de
generation
educación
of
pertinente,
research
es
and
decir, que esté
education.
conectada
So a
realmente con los
connection
territorios y con las
with the
realidades que se
territories
estaban
and the
dando y que
realities in the
nuestros ejercicios de
territories,
investigación
and that
puedan
our
tener
researchers
un lenguaje
can
en común, es
have a
decir,
common
que todos
language,
estemos
and
vinculados
so that
realmente con esa
we all are linked
orientación a
to this
resolver o responder las
orientation to
problemáticas
answer
actuales de cada uno de
the
nuestros
problems
territorios
of all
y
these
que en
different
esa vía pues
territories,
también
and
deba estar los
also
procesos de educación muy en
these
sintonía
education
y que
programs should be in
facilitemos
line
nuestro
with
rol
this, and
desde un rol
we
que
have to
desempeñemos
be
en nuestras áreas, pues
facilitators,
también que los más jóvenes, ya sea
and
en las
so that
universidades, en los
the young
colegios,
people in
pero también en
schools,
las
in
comunidades,
universities,
se
and in
vinculen no
communities,
solamente la forma, pues también en la misma línea de lo que ya
following the same
mencionaba
lines that
Mónica,
Monica
Estefan y
and
por
Stefan
supuesto Elena desde su
and Olena
experiencia,
mentioned,
pues desde una unas prácticas de cuidados
with
y el otro.
these
Y el otro, pues también siendo las comunidades
different
deben ser,
practices,
reconocidas,
including
respetadas,
communities.
desde su
Communities have to
política
be
y desde una
respected
perspectiva política y ética,
with
desde
an
su labor y
ethical
su
and
trabajo,
political
una implicación,
perspective.
y eso implica pues un cambio y unas
And
transformaciones que no son
this
sencillas,
requires
pero que
difficult
realmente son
transformations,
satisfactorias.
but I think they will be very satisfactory.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this up, Monica, and then we will try to look into that as well. With regards to the gender issue, I should maybe mention, or maybe someone from Obreal could also fill in here, that at the same time when the interregional dialogue is happening in Bogota, there will also be an international conference of women in science in Bogota. So we will have the possibility to have a very large number of female scientists around to give them a stronger voice and a stronger presence in these international discussions, which I hope will also bringing the gender perspective and more feminist perspectives on the issues that we're about to discuss there in general. But I'm pretty sure that we could also try to, or hopefully we can try to do this also for the indigenous communities, especially in Colombia. This should be something realistically achievable, I think, during the event. Other questions, other remarks that anyone would like to add? Not at this point in time. So again, thank you very much for participating today, for bringing in these very different perspectives from very different regions of the world, both in zones where the conflicts are still going on, in the case of Ukraine and all over war. In Central Asia, sometimes more hidden conflicts that we don't read so much about in the media, and at least in continental Europe. In Latin America, some of the conflicts, the Colombian one was also always very present here in Europe. The one in Guatemala, unfortunately, less so, admittedly. So I think there's room for us to learn more from one another, and also to exchange experiences from gender based interventions in different parts of the world. There's a whole different part of the world that we have not been looking into, which is the Middle East, for example, where this is also a very hard to discuss topic for various reasons. And I hope that we can continue this debate during the event in Bogota in November, and that we will make it broader and more participatory with representatives from Africa and potentially also other regions of the world than the ones represented here today. With this, I would like to hand back to Florencia for some last closing words, and then we end this meeting here today, and we will hopefully meet each other in Bogota in November then. Florencia, thank you.
Muchas gracias, Steven. Thank you very much. Me gustaría agradecer a todos los speakers del día de hoy.
Thank you to all the speakers, and also thank you to DID and the work they've been doing in Latin America and in Africa and in Europe. So, Stephen, thank you very much for being the host in this webinar. And I invite you to be present in November in Bogota, as Stefan mentioned. And we are going to organize activities jointly with the conference of the UNESCO OWBDC. So we invite you to pay attention to the agenda that we will be sharing with all of you. So thank you very much on behalf of Obreal. Thank you for participating.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Hasta luego.
Gracias.